the hair trick. Wow, this is a pretty cool and yet somewhat elaborate trick. And so I've saved it for near the end. It's the hair trick. I'm going to teach you 5 things. You're going to make a fade hairbrush. You're going to save it. You're going to use it on a channel or a layer mask. Then I'm going to teach you how to lock the transparency on a layer. The shortcut is a question mark, which makes no sense, but there it is. And then the last of the 5 pieces of this tip is you're going to clone with the existing hair. Let's get started. I'm going to make a hairbrush. I'm grabbing my brush tool, right? Grab the brush tool. Then look up. There are 3 components for making and saving a brush. You're probably used to choosing a brush from here. Now yours may look different. I'm on the latest version. They've made some changes. But that's just picking the round brush or whatever it is, right? So you pick your brush there. I'm picking a very tiny brush, and I've done that by just taking one of the existing brushes and just telling the type size or the size to go very, very small. I'm choosing a 2 or a 1 point brush. I'll just start with a 2. It's very tiny. If I were to paint right now, you would see that's a small brush. Let me try it a little smaller with a 1. Yeah, that's very thin. That's hair thin. Good. Now, part 2. I've chosen my brush part 1. Part 2, I'm going to go grab the customizers for the brush. And what's important to me here is that I choose something called shape dynamics. You default to brush tip shape, and let's start there and change the spacing. By default, whenever you paint with a brush, Adobe squirts. You don't get a smooth brush, and sometimes you'll get a caterpillar effect on a brush. Let me show you what I mean. If you play with the spacing on oh my goodness, look at that. It's like a caterpillar, because the default spacing on a brush is 25%, and you can see those little ripples. I don't like those ripples, but it's trying to speed you up, so you can really crank that in and you'll get very smooth. That's not the default. The default is 25% of the width of the brush. As you drag, it squirts ink. Anyway, with that in mind, I'm going to go ask for a 1 point, again, 1 point brush. It's going to be teeny weeny, right? We already know this. I'm holding it down, 1 point brush, but customize it so that the spacing is as low as it goes, 1%. Now, shape dynamics. Shape dynamics. What's important here is under the control area, which is set to offset to fade. And then tell it how many squirts. You have to guess that you want this brush to fade out as you drag. I'm going to say 150. Why? Because I've done it before. So I know, okay? So this brush is going to fade, and it's going to look like this. That's a 150 fade. Now, if I tell that to be a 250 fade, it's longer. If I tell that to be a 550 fade, see, it's an even longer hair. We're making a hair brush. We're going to paint hair. I'm going to look at that and say, 250 looked pretty good to me. I'm happy with it. That's the result of what the hairbrush is going to look like. I'm done with this panel. Close it. So part 1 was pick a brush. Part 2 was customize the brush. Part 3, and it's out of order. 1, 2, 3, right back to the top. You're kidding me. It's out of order. Sneak down on the brush saves, and click that plus sign. Save a new one. Call it the hair brush. Now, it may not hurt to say 1 point. You can change it anytime you want, but I did it at 250 fade. I'm just being as specific as I can be. Shall I include my current foreground color as my color? No, I'll pick whatever color I want. Very good. So here's what we've done. We chose a brush, we customized the brush, and we saved it. All right, so we make a fade hairbrush and we save it. Part 1, part 2. Part 3, we're going to use it. I've already got a channel that I started with here. Okay, that's a good start for her. You saw me working on this earlier, but I can see there are spots where the hair looks kind of chunky, and I could sell it a little bit more if I took my new hairbrush and I started somewhere where there's not, and pulled it out. You see that little hair going out in space? All right, now that's a little long, so I can go back and change my fade, or I can start the process more inside her head and then drag it out, and I don't get as long a hair, you see? That's how it works. All right, so up here at the top, I'm going to start dragging, and as I get near the edge, I'm just painting, I think the term here is wild hairs. I'm just painting some wild hairs just to supersell the effect that, man, have I given her a terrific hair cut out of the background. I'm selling with some wild hairs. Now, of course, these hairs were not really in the original. So what it's really doing when I come back is it's going to be grabbing, it's going to be selecting some of that wild hairness from the gray. And we're going to fix that in a little bit. All right. I'm going to Command click to load the stencil. I'm going to jump, Command J. I'll hide my background. For giggles, let me go ahead and create a new layer and fill it with a brownish, start there, let's see, a little bit lighter. Ah, good, that's good. And now you can see the problem, right? I created some wild hairs, but they're not her hair color. They're actually that gray. We grabbed the gray, and then there's a lot of gray that seemed to make it through our selection earlier, that earlier process. So now it's time to protect the transparency. I'm going to hide the middle layer. That top layer that's selected has some transparent spots and some opaque spots. And the way you protect the paint, or the way you lock and protect the transparency, is to hit the question mark. It makes no sense. I'm just going to go down and tap the question mark, and it's locked. What's locked? What's locked? Transparency is locked. It's an easy trick, and it's a toggle. Question mark turns it on and off. It's on. Now what that means is if I were to paint, let me paint with that brown paint in a very large regular brush, not my faded brush anymore. I'm going to go pick one of the standard brushes. If I were to paint in the transparent area, it wouldn't let me, but as soon as I got onto the opaque areas, it would let me. It's like a built-in stencil. I don't have one. It just protects the areas of paint. I love this trick. It lets me paint where there's already paint. And I'm going to do that with that protected, but I'm going to paint with my clone tool. All right, let's turn on the brown middle layer so I can see what my problems are. So what I'm going to do is with my clone tool, I'm going to option click and load hair. And since I'm painting where there's already paint and protecting where there is no paint, as I click and drag with my clone tool, it uses her actual hair color. Option click to reload, more hair. It's using her actual, not just hair color, her actual hair to get rid of those edges. Now see what I did there? I got a little bit too much, so I'm going to undo and say, I better be careful around that edge. So I'm going to grab a little space here, come way out into the transparency. Very protected. No harm, no foul. You can't get any paint on the outside. So I'm reloading, option clicking often, or alt clicking on the PC. Often, alt click. And I'm really just trying to match the curvature of these hairs as they fall, alt click. That side looks great. Time to get the top. I think you get the idea. Hey, listen, this is the way that you solve any of those glowy edges that you may have received when you were cutting something from its original background. That's how it is. And all of the hairs will have her actual natural hair color. I'm option clicking, option clicking, option clicking, option clicking, option clicking, just to keep reloading. Option clicking to keep reloading. Fresh hair. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the perfectionist's hair trick. no matter what background color that's on. There is no glowy white edge that shows through, or glowy gray edge in this case that shows through. It's pure hair 100% of the time. If that looked complicated to you and you want something easy and simple for a darn change, let me show you how Sensei has given us this incredible power in the most recent versions of Photoshop. All right, once again, I'm going to hide the text. I'm going to click my subject. Okay, did you blink? Watch. Select the subject. That's it. What? Sensei? What? Now, you could be done. You could jump right now. But I want to take a peek. So I'm going to save that stencil so I can look at it. Look how beautifully Sensei did all that great work for me in the most recent version of Photoshop. That's the 2022. Now I can still combine all the tricks I know. I could still go use my hairbrush and still play that game and add little hairs here or there to sell the effect. But you know what else I could do is I could get my paintbrush without the hairbrush just to get myself a nice paint away. I'm going to give her a haircut. She doesn't like this crazy hair, so I'm painting it out of the stencil. It will not be a part of the selection. For example, that will not be a part of the selection if I paint that hair away. So I can actually trim her hair, knowing how to manage and use a stencil via channels. Via the channels. There it is. She's popped out. You see that right there where I painted her hair out a little bit too much. I used a little too soft a brush, a little gray. I'm going to undo. Let's go back and take a peek. Undo. So be cautious. You may need a harder edged brush. I'm doing shift, right bracket. Then I won't get caught with a soft edge brush, which creates gray. I don't want that. Command or Control click. Back on my artwork. Command J for jump. She goes over the text. Text shows up. And there you go. That's how it works. Now I still have, apparently, that real hair below. You see, that's poking out. So let's go play a little bit with that. I'm going to make my selection on the background. Select, not her, but the opposite of her. Select the inverse. I can clone stamp from gray that's out there where her hair doesn't exist. And the stencil protects me. I can only paint in the hole, and that's the outside of her. Whew! Created some grief, solved some grief. Haircut, trim, Sensei. I love you, man.